Welcome to the first episode of the Bulldog Broadcast with Dan Dickau on the field of 68 Media Network. Glad to have you join us as I start this new endeavor to cover Gonzaga basketball in a slightly different way. The goal is one podcast a week with current and past players and coaches, other people that are well connected to the program. Today's first guest might be the best guest, and it might be all downhill from here. And that is none other than Gonzaga legend, 2006 AP Player of the Year, a good friend of mine, Adam Morrison. Mo, how goes it? And what is filling your days right now as the college basketball season is right around the corner?
It's great. Thanks for having me on. I'm just kind of pretty much locked into AAU basketball with my daughters and stuff like that right now. So it's been basketball is coming back around. The gyms are starting to open up with everything going on. So it's been a nice little teaser going into the season here, getting ready to call the games for Gonzaga radio. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But, just ending summer and getting into winter hoops. It's been good.
Obviously, you and I talk to the coaching staff quite frequently to kind of hear about how guys are looking, how they're improving, what the prospects of the team is going to be looking like. I'm not quite to the point where I'm kind of doing my due diligence to break down the team for my broadcast prep on the TV side. You're on the radio side now. I've been impressed in hearing your progress from when you started until the end of last season when the pandemic shut everything down. Did you think you would ever get into broadcasting during your playing career, and are you enjoying it?
Thank you. First, I appreciate the compliment. But yeah, I never really had any, I guess, interest in it while I was playing. And then after I went back and finished my degree at Gonzaga and I was coaching a little bit, I kind of had to make a choice of if I wanted to coach or if I wanted to pursue other avenues. And the radio gig came up, and it was actually something that I really quite enjoy. It's fun. You've done radio yourself, so you kind of have to describe quickly. It's a little bit different than TV, obviously. But I do enjoy, staying a part of the game a little bit, seeing the development of young kids, and how a team can progress, from the start of the year to the end of the year. So there's all those aspects that, as former players, you tend to miss that you don't realize you miss until you really, really step away. And I get a little bit of that. I get the locker room feeling a little bit. I get the excitement before certain games. I get to see, like I said, teams progress, and then you see real growth in players. So that part is really fulfilling. I do enjoy, getting a little bit of my cup filled with basketball through the radio.
A lot of guys, when they're done, they look at coaching, they look at maybe get into broadcasting because they want to stay close to the game. That was similar for me. You mentioned missing different aspects of the game. Is there one thing that you missed more than anything else? And I think I know what your answer is, and I'll hold off and sharing that until after I hear your take.
Yeah, I think you're going to understand this. It's the locker room. You miss being around the fellas. A close second is, having a competitive outlet. You can try other things in life and get a little bit of that golf, fantasy, for whatever you want to add into that, but it's just not the same. So, when you're part of the radio, I guess you're part of the university still, so you still have a little bit of stake of winning, right? So you feel like, all right, we did it, guys, the other ticket people and the people in the athletic giving and stuff. So you still have a locker room aspect, but that's the one thing I miss the most is, just being around people that you enjoy and talking basketball. And I get that with doing broadcasting. So I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, the locker room is something that a lot of guys mention when you talk to them about kind of transition from playing to not playing that they miss. you said the competitiveness. To me, that might be the thing that I miss the most, where you're preparing to compete against the best every single day.
Mhm.
Myself, occasionally I find an outlet. I go down and play pickup basketball with John Stockton's group on Sundays at the warehouse, where it's kind of a limited group of guys that go play. I probably don't do it enough. And so when I go down there, I don't play as well as I'd like, or I get hurt because, Father Time is undefeated. Um,
Yep.
but do you ever find yourself wanting to lace the sneakers back up and giving it, one last shot? Obviously, I know we're past the ability to go play at a high level league, but in an open gym type setting.
Um, Sometimes, I see you guys on the Sundays too. And, I'm friends with John as well and his kids, David and Houston, and they're always bugging me to come down and play. Um, I think sometimes, here's the thing is, I will be more upset if I go and play because I know I can't do half the stuff that I used to be able to do. And then I know on the way home, I'll be pissed off the whole weekend, that I'll be thinking about it the next time. And basketball does that to you. And so it's one of those issues where I like that feeling, but also I know I'm going to be pissed off for no reason for, 7 days until the next time we play again. And so that's part of the reason I haven't played as much. And then frankly, I'm just so badly out of shape that if I get out there, I'm worried about getting hurt. But again, I coach 2 basketball teams with my daughter. And then I do obviously the broadcasting, as you mentioned. So I get enough basketball, people are like, well, you don't play pickup, and they looked a little bit perplexed. And I'm just like, yeah, man, I mean, I really do get enough hoop to feel good about myself. But also I know if I go there and I shoot a step back and I airball it, because I know I will now, I will be pissed for 7 days until we play again. So it's a little bit of, I already know what mindset I'm going to get into, or I'm going to trick myself and think I could still play again. And, I don't want to do that to my own mind, right? You know what I'm talking about. You get there and you're like, I can still play. And you got there and you're like, oh, okay, Father Time, you're right. I can't. So
That's so spot on when people ask, hey, do you still play? And they're literally confused when you say, oh, no, I don't have time, or I'd rather coach, or I'd rather do the
yeah,
broadcasting. Because a lot of people think that, because we played and spent so much time, it's something that we do still to this day, every single day. And you're right. There's a certain amount of success that you have in your mind that if you
yes,
can't repeat that every time you play, you get frustrated and it hangs with you. And that's something that now you talk about, you don't even play. But if you were to play, a play or a possession would hang with you for a week. There were games that have hung with me now for 15, 20 years, even 25 years, going back to high school. Is there a particular game or a play that still hangs with you, that you run back in your mind, that, maybe it didn't turn out the way that you wanted to, or maybe there was a play that turned out unbelievably well, and you look back when you need a boost that gets you positive thinking for that day, that you can look back and say, wow, that was amazing that I did that?
There's one in particular in high school that is a tough one for me to swallow. And it's funny that you mentioned that. Because you probably had the same experience. You guys were probably good in high school. You still keep in contact with some of those guys. Those usually are guys that you grew up in elementary, middle school, at least a core group, and you played together. So, a lot of former NBA players and, college players as well still remember their high school days as well with fond memories. And my junior year, we lost to Shadle Park with Danny Pariseau, who played at Santa Clara, 4 times in 1 year. And the last time we lost to him was in regionals, and it was, you got to lose twice, but it was the first game. And I think I had like 41, and we lost at, like a buzzer beater, and we lost 4 times in that year. So that's one of the losses. Obviously the cliche answer would be UCLA. Everybody knows that. But that game still bothers me for some reason, because I played one of probably my best game as a junior that year. And if we win, we were guaranteed to go to state, and we ended up winning the next game to make it to state. But it was one of those where I left it out on the floor and we still couldn't get it done. And losing 4 times in one season to the same team is brutal. So that's one of the games.
That's so funny that you mentioned a loss. When I look back at my career, same thing. There's a high school game in the state semifinals that hangs with me to this day. And then my senior year in the NCAA tournament, we were ranked 6th in the country. We get a 6th seed, and we lose in the first round where we played our worst game of the year. Those 2 games, more than any good games that I had or our team had, are the ones that hang with me and frustrate me to this day. When did you fall in love with the game of basketball?
Probably 6 or 7, I imagine. Thinking back, my dad was a college basketball coach, so I was always ingrained in that culture. He was always going to practices, so I was always at the gym with him. And I remember playing YMCA. They used to do it on the racquetball courts, and then they put the mini hoops up, and I was just always a little bit better than everybody, so I kind of really liked having the success early. Honestly, I was more or less brainwashed to like basketball. Even I do love it, but my earliest memories are basketball with my family. So ever since I had cognitive mindset that I could understand what was going on, I loved basketball, and that's the truth. It's really been a big part of my life, obviously. But I grew up with a coach for a dad, and it was like, you're playing basketball and you're not going to know anything else, and that's what it was.
I've gotten to know your dad a little bit over the years, and I've seen his passion for the game, and I can only imagine, not having known you as a young kid, that would have been ingrained and passed on to you, and the focus on fundamentals that you probably had from a young age that, quite frankly, not a lot of kids get. Were there any days that you can remember in the early part of your career, once you began to have success at the high school or college level, that your dad had a mixed message as opposed to what the head coach of the team that you had?
That's actually pretty good. So we've been family friends with my high school coach, Glenn Williams. Been a big part of my life. Not only just on the court, but off. I thanked him at, my jersey ceremony, just to give context of what he means as a coach in my career. And so my dad and him had a good relationship because my dad coached our AAU team. So he was always kind of picking Glenn's brain to run similar stuff and similar terminology. So when you pass them on to your high school coach, you're kind of ready to go. And, we started to run chin, with high posts and 2, cutters. And it's kind of a weird offense because everything's above the 3-point line. And I remember my dad, when they first put it in, was just like, you guys are really running chin. And I could see he visibly wasn't happy. He's like, all right, every time you catch it on the wing, you just rip and go. Like, don't swing it, because we don't get the otother action, because it's not going to come back around. And eventually, we started putting in, a back screen to a re-screen and a down screen and, a phase cut and things like that, where then he could finally, the blood pressure went down, because he wasn't going to tell somebody how to run their program, obviously, but he knew I could score. So he was like, you got to screen for him. You got to get him movement. You can't just have him standing out on the perimeter. So that was probably the only time he ever kind of bucked anything any coach of mine said. But I grew up in a household coach was always right 99% of the time.
Well, where was that 1% of time the coach wasn't right? Do you remember that?
Well, I remember my dad. Yeah, I mean, a few times in my NBA career when I was in Charlotte, that he would call and obviously he's not saying he could coach at the NBA level, but he would be like, all right, you need to do this. And this is what I've known you, I know your game. This is what you need to do. And you know how that league is. It can get selfish really quick if you're not winning. So that was kind of the message, like, hey, doesn't mean you don't make the right play, but sometimes you need to be a little bit more selfish, and try to make the most of your opportunities. So that's probably the only time.
No, you're 100% right. In regards to the NBA, you have to balance the selfishness of your own career with the unselfishness of trying to play to win. And that was one of my struggles at times is I always tried to play the right way, and I would pass up what should have been a good shot to maybe get a better shot, when in all actuality, looking back, I probably should have squeezed off a few more here or there, maybe lengthened my career. But, in hindsight, it is what it is. We both had the ability and the opportunity to compete against the best in the world, and it was full of memories. The first time you and I really got to meet or know each other, I was still at Gonzaga. You were a high school kid, and you started coming, as a lot of the good high school kids in the area would, to play open gyms with the Gonzaga guys, whether it was in the fall before our practices began or in the spring. But you were different than a lot of those other high school guys in the fact that you came with a confidence and a swagger that a lot of the other guys wouldn't. Usually high school kid gets in the game, they pass every single time, they only take 5 shots. You would go right at guys, whether it was, Richie Fromm, who was rehabbing from an injury and trying to get into the pros, whether it was Blake Stepp on the wings or Anthony Rees and some of these other guys. What did you take as a high school kid or what kind of approach did you take when you came to play with us as college guys?
I think I was more excited for the opportunity to get the open run at first. And then, I always felt like I could play at that level. And so I kind of just came in with the mentality of, let's find out what I really need to work on. And what was always nice about coming to those open runs, when I've talked about this before, and you understand this, is the culture of Gonzaga is going to allow a high school kid to come in and be successful, right? Some programs wouldn't even let a kid get on the floor, and guys wouldn't probably pass to him. I know that happens a little bit, but once I was, being a little bit more successful out there, I felt like I was good enough to play at that level, and then I was welcomed, and the ball started rolling from there. I remember the first time I played with you was at the GU camp. They asked some of the high school kids to do the open run at night.
Yeah.
And you threw a behind the back pass, like a swing pass, and it hit me in the forehead. And you looked at me with like, what the fuck are you doing? And I still remember, because you were looking to your right and I was on the left wing, and you threw it was perfect behind the back because it fooled the defense. And I wasn't expecting it, and it hit me right in the forehead and bounced over to the next guy like it was a swing. And I remember you just looking at who is this skinny kid? What is this kid doing out here? So that was my first Dan Dickau interaction. But you didn't cuss me out or anything, but it was funny, how funny the world works, that, we're friends later on. We both had good careers and blah, blah, blah. But it's first interaction is why this kid can't even catch a pass? Why is he even out here, with the big dogs at night playing at camp? So
that's an awesome story. And now that you mentioned that, I do remember that. And those late night runs at Gonzaga team camp were some of the best. All the guys would come back into town. Some of the Gonzaga guys who were pros would come back. And if you were a high school kid and were in those games, I can only imagine it was a little intimidating, but it was It was a chance to earn your stripes and make you feel like you belonged. And one of the ways that high school kids kind of get to know that they belong is once you start getting recruited. And I know there's been lots of articles and interviews written about your recruitment process, and really nobody recruited you outside of Gonzaga and maybe a few others. When Coach Few and Leon Rice, they offered you a scholarship, how easy was that to accept?
Oh, it was the perfect situation. you know, my dad was always, like I said, he coached JUCO for 20 years, so he understood how the recruiting process worked. He knew Fewy and Bill Greer before we moved up to Spokane, because obviously they recruited in his area in Wyoming. And so he was very familiar with the program. He knew how the coaching staff worked. And he kind of explained to him, like, look, at the time I was 6'4", he's like, Adam's probably going to grow, he's probably going to get a little bit better. So when they offered, he was like, yeah, this is the perfect place where you can go. If you have to redshirt, even though I didn't, you can. They understand the diabetic aspect of it. So it was a no-brainer for us. And then obviously having to be a local kid. And then the program was primed for another jump, because of what, your guys' class and the team before you guys did. You laid the framework, and then it was the next step. So it was like, it was still a mid-major, and I know everybody at that time hated that term, even though it doesn't get used anymore, but it was like mid-major with some upside. And so it was like perfect level for me to go on and play right away. I couldn't play it at a Duke or Kentucky right away. You know what I mean? Like, I just wasn't athletic enough. I wasn't polished enough. I could have survived, but I would have got recruited over, blah, blah, blah. So coming to Gonzaga was definitely no brainer for me. Absolutely.
I look at the Gonzaga program as having a couple, monumental steps to becoming what they are now. I look at that initial Elite Eight run as being that first step. And without, not wanting to sound like someone who has a big ego, I think myself being a first-team All-American was the next step, where
Yep.
you're going to get recognition for what somebody did throughout an entire season. Now, you took it to the next level in being AP College Player of the Year alongside J.J. Redick in 2006. And then there's been a couple other steps to now becoming a true blue blood, where you're a Final Four participant in 2017. To me, that was the next really big monumental step.
Yep.
Once they win a championship, that's it. No questions asked. You can't take them off of that perch as being a top tier program. When you look at the Gonzaga program, how much pride do you have in the fact that you were instrumental in helping them take that next leap as far as recognition nationally?
A lot, actually. Because when I first came to Gonzaga, like you mentioned earlier, all the player guys, pros like yourself, and the guys that were playing overseas always came back and made sure that culture still was evident, and that still, the teamness, the oneness, even though we didn't, play together, you're still a Zag, blah, 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 all that stuff. And so, I did the same thing when I played. And then I know Kelly did the same thing. David did the same thing. And it just kind of continued. And so, when you come up in this program, you kind of, have relationships with every guy. It's not, even though they weren't your teammate, you still played a lot with them in the off season. You still watch them from afar. You still root for them, obviously. So after you leave and you see the program take the next step, you actually have a little bit of a emotional investment in some of those players, and you're excited for them because you knew how you felt as a young man during that time. So I couldn't be more proud of how the university has handled the success. They didn't fumble it. That happens a lot. Fewy and the staff have gotten 10 times better. I mean, how much of a better coach is Fewy compared to when you were there and I was there, obviously? And that's not a knock on him, but you can just see how their staff handles different defenses, rebounding. I mean, we just tried to outscore people. Like, we couldn't do half the stuff they do now. And so just seeing that the trending upwards to continue for 20 plus years, it's fantastic to say, hey, I was part of that, honestly.
You mentioned Coach Few has grown as a coach, and I'm in complete agreement on that. I had him on my podcast for SB Live Sports, the ISO, and I asked him the question of very similar, like, where has your growth development come from as a coach? And he's kind of mentioned it's just kind of come from, being around it and talking to people and seeing different things and being willing to try different things. I've been most impressed, I think, with his growth, seeing him becoming more involved with USA Basketball and taking some of the things that he's seen from the international game and implementing them into Gonzaga's system. Is there one thing that you've seen from him that makes you sit back and say, you know what, I wish we ran this when I was in college?
Yeah, I wish, I think we were still kind of a flex type team. And I wish we would do a little bit more open ball screen stuff. But the game has changed in the last 10, 15 years, which is crazy to think. But now, the wide pin downs and the screen downs and stuff are not really used. There's bigs more in college basketball, but that's even fading out. You kind of need a guy that can step out and shoot it. So I think just the open kind of motion that they run with, it's a ruled motion with a lot of freedom, but we were kind of more of, come off a down screen. If you don't have it, throw it inside, or shoot a step back and or run flex. So I think just kind of how they run the offense nowadays is a lot more fluid. It's more conducive to allow guys to make more plays. There's a lot of freedom. And it's funny, probably people listening were like, well, Adam, you got to shoot whenever you want. And so I'm not saying I didn't have any freedom, but it's more fluid to watch now. I mean, they're just so much better on every every facet of the game. I mean, rebounding is way better. Their defense is 10 times better than what it used to be. And that's not just athletes, it's how they coach it. They demand it more. And so, just overall, Coach Few and the staff, Tommy Lloyd, have done a fantastic job of evolving over the years and not getting stale and understanding that, to get high-level recruits, there's some things you're going to have to change and be willing to adapt and be willing to kind of bite your tongue with and allow kids to have more freedom and take, quote-unquote, bad shots or put the ball in the hands of a freshman and run a lot of ball screen stuff. 10, 20 years ago, he would have fell out of his chair, right? I mean,
yeah,
and rightfully so, but they teach it better now. So it's just fun to watch because I've seen, the old Coach Few, and you're obviously involved doing the TV with them. So you've seen the old Coach Few and you see it now and you're like, man, can I get this coaching staff when I was there? Not saying we weren't bad. We were obviously fantastic, but just seeing how well and much they've improved is pretty cool to watch from afar.
Yeah, I look at the continuity ball screen offense that they run and the amount of pick and rolls I as a point guard could have come off of. I'm jealous. And I think for you, you as good as you were with wide pin down actions or creating your own shot off the bounce, I think the spacing to allow you to come off of dribble handoffs in that offense, it would have been nearly unstoppable. If they try to jam it early, you read screens so well, you just back cut. And then you would have had bigs like JP Batista who were so smart and could have made that pass to you. You would have been, instead of averaging 28 a game, you might have averaged 32, 33 in that.
Yeah. Offense. Yeah. It's just they've really allowed their players to make good decisions. And, it's just more fluid and more open. And so I'm always sitting there like, man, how come we couldn't run that? We were running flex, so then crack down and big, it was dinosaur plays, but they still worked at the time. Yeah, they worked. So
what's your relationship now with Coach Few? I know it always changes from, current player to professional player where you're maybe asking him for some advice here and there with different things, or he's tracking your career to the now retired player who's still around the program a bit.
It's definitely evolved. When you're there, he has a job to do, and this is Captain Obvious, but he's got to win games. So he's not going to be your friend, but he's also not, a John Chaney or anything like that, or Bobby Knight. Obviously, he doesn't demean you, but he can make you, tear up a little bit every once in a while. And we've all been through a good chewing out from him. And when you look back as a player and as a coach now, you understand it made perfect sense, and he was in the right. So I think knowing him now is a lot more enjoyable than it was when I was a player. And I think he's loosened up a lot, if that makes sense. He wasn't a very social guy early on when I was there, which is fine. He's kind of an introverted personality, but I think he's kind of learned to allow people to get to know him a little bit more. And I think that goes with his former players as well and his current players. So my relationship with him now is in the last 5 years has really grown, because I didn't really know him like the way I do now. Like, on the road, we'll go out and have beers and have normal conversations besides basketball. Playing there, obviously he's not going to have a beer with his player, but I'm saying that you never had any conversations with him about anything but, did you box out or not? So when you finally get to know him in that way, it's pretty interesting, because he is a cool guy. He's just a little bit introverted, but he's evolved, man. I'm telling you, all the former players that are still in town, if I see him, they're just sometimes just like, Fewy actually goes out with you guys. And I'm like, yeah, man, he's fun to be around. He's a good dude. And they kind of, look at you because you can't see him in that light because the way he was, early on. But, he had a method to his madness and obviously been successful at it.
Yeah, you had a tremendous amount of success under him, and you had a decision to make: go to the NBA as an early entry candidate or come return for your senior year. It was an obvious choice to me at the time, being in the NBA, for you to leave. Obviously, it must have been difficult knowing that you're playing for Gonzaga, a school you grew up watching and loving in your hometown. What was Coach Few's message? Was he pushing you out the door knowing you were going to be a top 5, ultimately top 3 pick?
Yeah, he actually he sat me down and he tried to get me to come back. And it wasn't a half-hearted attempt, but he just gave me the pros and cons of coming back. And he was logical and fair with the pros of going to the NBA as well. So he gave it a college try. He kind of knew that I was going to go. And so I always respected him for that, because it wasn't, like, hey, you're screwing us over type of pitch. It was like, hey, if you come back, you can break all these records. You can solidify yourself as, one of the best Gonzaga players of all things that were legitimate. But then he also understood, it was like, hey, you do have a wonderful opportunity if you leave early. So I've always respected him for that, for, being logical and not being, not selfish, but understanding that, he's trying to, keep a good player in his program for one more year.
Yeah, most people know you more for your college career than your NBA career. And I'd love to hear if you're okay with that, or you wish it were different. But you get to a team in the NBA, Charlotte, that quite frankly, when I was in the league at the time, was looked at as dysfunctional because of the roster makeup. How big of an adjustment was that for you when, you might be viewed as one thing by the media or the front office, and then you've got teammates that I can remember watching games, they double pump a pass fake, and now all of a sudden that window to catch and shoot is gone, and you're now taking a contested shot as opposed to a wide open shot?
Yeah, it was definitely a big adjustment, because at the time Charlotte was, I think, 2 years from being an expansion. So the guys that were there, besides their picks, were considered, this is not derogatory, but kind of castaways. So everybody was really selfish in how they wanted their personal accolades to go. And rightfully so. That's part of pro basketball. We've discussed that a little bit earlier. But it was night and day compared to, the team aspect that you are, required to be a part of at Gonzaga, unless you're not going to survive there if you're not. So it was a tough adjustment. The culture too of the South was a little bit different for me. Nice people. It was not what I was used to. So yeah, it was a different world out there for those 2.5 years I was there. It was interesting because I wasn't used to guys not making a swing on a pass. I wasn't used to guys pointing to you when you made them a nice pass. I wasn't used to guys, deliberately talking bad about another teammate for no reason. It's just so, but that's pro basketball and it's in most aspects, right? You understand what I'm saying when I say that. So it was interesting for sure. It was an eye opener.
You spent a lot of time as a rookie improving your game. I believe you were second team all rookie team in the NBA. You got a lot of promise leading into year two. The Bobcats, you're in LA to play the Lakers in a preseason game, and it's actually a doubleheader. I was playing with the Clippers at the time. We played the first game, obviously, because we're the Clippers. We were not the Lakers with the top billing. And I remember after the game, I'm sitting, I believe it was in the training room, icing my knees or ankles or whatever, and I'm watching the screen. And you go for a closeout, and you tear your ACL. Every athlete, I can't say every athlete, but most athletes go through a devastating or a big injury at some point. You had been healthy throughout your career up until this point. What was going through your mind, and how did you overcome that injury to get yourself back to compete again at the NBA level?
It was, obviously, devastating at the time, because I think with that team, we had a new coach coming in that year. I was told I was going to be a sixth man, play 20 to 25, maybe 28 minutes a game, be a second unit scorer. And I think that would have been a great role for me. In the league, it would have saved my body a little bit, playing 82 games. It would have helped me, regain confidence. So I felt good during that preseason. I think I was averaging 14, 15, feeling good in that role, letting it rip. And when that happened, it was, devastating, obviously physically and then mentally. It was just because I couldn't turn the corner, with confidence. I was starting to gain it, starting to feel good. And then that happened. So it was a tough time to, go through that mentally and then try to get yourself up physically. And it honestly took me about 1.5 years to feel right again physically. And, that came with playing some summer league. I did some, rehab with when I got traded to LA. I did some different type of rehab that really helped me turn the corner. But it took me 1.5 years to feel right again. And the clock's ticking once you get in the league. So that part was a little bit frustrating, but I was lucky that I just had an ACL. I've seen guys, do a lot worse. And like you said, most athletes have something that really kind of turns their career sideways. And that was one for me.
You mentioned getting traded to the Lakers, and getting traded is never easy. I was traded more times than I can remember in the course of my career. You have to go kind of get acclimated quickly to a city, to an organization, to a roster, to a coaching staff and philosophy. But you go into a position with the Lakers where, one of the most storied franchises ever. They're loaded at your position at the wings, and they've got one of the best players of all time in Kobe Bryant. I can only imagine going in wanting to prove that you're back healthy and you can contribute, but also wanting to earn guys' respect through your hard work and dedication. What were some of the experiences like with the Lakers early in that process, and what was Kobe like?
It was interesting coming to a team that, went to the finals the year before, that was on a, obviously a championship mission. So getting traded mid-season was obviously different. But right away I noticed the culture compared from LA to the Lakers from the Bobcats was more, I guess, quote unquote, what I was used to. Guys, generally respected each other. Guys usually made the right basketball play. Guys were, on a common mission. So that felt good to get back into that culture again. And I was always welcomed there. I always felt like, we were trying to do things for each other, not just for oneself. So when I got there, it was an easy transition for me to fit in, if that makes any sense. I already knew Luke Walton. I knew Jordan Farmar. I actually hosted him on his visit to Gonzaga when I was a freshman. So we already kind of knew each other. So they made the transition easier. And then, obviously Roney was there right before I got there. So he, made some phone calls, was probably like, take care of my boy Adam. And that was the case when I got there. And so it was great to, kind of go from a culture that wasn't very joyful basketball wise. And then, obviously go to a storied franchise that, does things the right way. So that transition was easier than it could have been, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And how about Kobe? Because you're somebody who has had a unbelievable competitive streak, and we all have read the stories, heard the stories, seen the experiences with Kobe and his competitive drive. How did you guys get along?
We got along great. He was, very curious on kind of how I was going to fit into the offense and triangle. So, when I first got there, he was like, you need to learn the triangle if you want to play here, obviously, but that goes without saying. But when he's saying, it's like, okay, I need to really study on what the cuts are and what the movements are. And, I got to see firsthand how competitive he really was in practice. I think the first time Shannon Brown, who got traded with me, had practice with them was I think we were in Oklahoma City. And, I think Kobe practiced that day because he knew that two new guys were coming, and he absolutely destroyed both of us the whole time. Right. It just so he could leave his mark, even though it was well established as Kobe Bryant's basketball team, and we got two role players getting traded to your team. He kicked the shit out of us for an hour and a half, talking trash, shooting fadeaway, and I was playing as good as defense if I could play. Same with Shannon. And I remember Jordan Farmar, because I was shaking my head. He was in the middle, like when a team scores, you get the ball back. He's like, dude, it's all right, man. It's Kobe Bryant. Like, he's like, there's nothing you can do. You know what I mean? Because I was just like, because I'm trying to, it's my first practice. I'm trying to like be good and look good and blah, blah, blah. And he's hitting fadeaways. I'm holding him. I'm pushing him. He's all that stuff. So, he was a true competitor. He was the toughest guy I've ever played with and against, obviously, when I was in Charlotte. He literally was just an absolute warrior. He played through pain. He played through frustration. He wanted to win every single time and every single drill. That always sounds like a cliche, but I witnessed it with my own eyes. Like, he literally wanted to win. If you were playing marbles in the corner, he would try to come over and beat you. Like, he was just his mindset all the time. And if you had the same mindset as him, he didn't mess with you. And so that was what was really great about that Lakers team, was we had great chemistry and we had one common goal. And so he was a great teammate when I was there, no question.
You won the 2 titles with the Lakers. You go overseas for a couple short stints. You try to make a couple teams through a summer league and training camps. Every athlete who's kind of towards the end, and I don't mean to say this in a negative light, Adam, because I went through it. You're hanging on, looking for one last opportunity, and so many times it comes down to roster spots, contract of other players to allow you to make the team.
Yep.
When you finally say I'm done, which for me was very difficult to do, and as I can imagine it was for you, when you finally said I'm done, did you feel content with everything that you had done to give yourself the maximum amount to have success in your career, or did you have any regrets?
It's a good question. At first, I felt like I didn't have any regrets, but then you get older and you coach, and then you watch the game, and then you kind of just reflect and look back. Then it was like, yeah, man, there's times when I was like, I worked hard, but did I go as hard as I could have? And then, I mean, it goes back into seeing Kobe Bryant. It's like, okay, I'm definitely not working as hard as this guy. Now I can see why he's one of the greatest of all time. So when I first finished, when I was first done, I was so emotionally drained from basketball. It felt good. And then, there comes a time when you get a little bit upset and you get a little bit bitter at the game. So then you take a break from it. That's what my experience was. And then you fall back in love with it. And then that's when the reflection goes, especially coaching my daughter's, AAU teams. I'm like, man, how come I wasn't doing this or getting taught this at this age? And I'm going to make sure that I'm teaching this stuff so I don't have any regrets as a player. So there are times when I was like, man, I could have rehabbed harder. But also there's times when I'm like, hey, I played pretty good in certain situations, and it came down to contracts. Like you said, I didn't really have a chance anyway. So I'm not going to beat myself up over it because I know I played hard. I know I did the right things. So yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 because I don't think I didn't play hard every single time I took the floor. I didn't have a competitive mindset, but also, as a human being, you could always push yourself harder. And then when it's completely gone and you don't have that chance to push yourself harder, then that's when you snap your fingers. You're like, dang it, I should have worked a little bit harder. But did you and I, 99%er or 1%ers basketball wise, work harder than 99% of all the other kids? Absolutely. No question. Right. So it's always what you're comparing it to, I guess, a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's such an insightful answer to that question. I appreciate the honesty. One last question, Adam, before I let you go. I know I'm running a little bit long here, but you and I being good friends, we could talk basketball and Gonzaga stuff literally all day. And at some point, we'll have to do it again on the golf course too. And maybe we should live stream it with some gambling games going. But your Gonzaga view of Mount Rushmore. Who is your Mount Rushmore of Gonzaga players?
So there's only 4, or is there 5? There's 4 on Mount Rushmore, right? 4?
Yeah, I went to Mount Rushmore this summer with my family, so I need to know this. Yes, there's only 4.
4. Okay. To me, it's John, obviously. I put Domus up there. Let's see here. I'm trying to do one at every position too. That's the hardest part, because there's so many good players.
Yeah, that's why this is such a great question.
Right? I know, because it's like you just keep going through and then you're like, oh, I just forgot about that guy. So I got John, Domus. This is always a personal one, but I always put Roney up in the category. And people, his numbers aren't like outstanding at Gonzaga, but he changed the program, right, with international. He brought joy to so many people at the program. So I always put him up there as he was the first guy that was kind of a high-level athletic big that made it in the pros, that could do multiple things. So I got John, Domus, Roney, and then I'll put you on there as a point guard.
You don't have to do that. You got to go with yourself. I mean, I always try to stay away from answering that question.
It's such a hard thing to do because there's so many good players. There's so many players that I do like, that I watched and played with. I mean, Kevin Pangos, I liked watching him. I like Jeremy Pargo, liked watching him, right? You can go down the line.
Yeah.
And then so the older guys, and I feel bad for some of the older guys just get overlooked. Like, what about Casey, right? Casey was one of the toughest SOBs that ever played at Gonzaga. Obviously put up good numbers as well. What about a guy like Corey Violet, not talking on Rushmore, but like he never gets mentioned. He was a hell of a college basketball player. Blake, you just go down the line. I'm just like, man, I hate doing these because some of these guys
so
are my
funny,
friends too.
It's so true. I had to ask the question because I had an interview podcast with Doug Gottlieb, the analyst, a week or so ago, and we were talking about different things. And he asked me to rank point guards at Gonzaga. I said, well, obviously John. And then he says, don't put yourself in there. And I said, thank you, because I don't want to do that. But I mean, just you go down the position of point guards. You got Pangos Perkins, Jeremy Pargo, who some people consider a combo or a two as opposed to a one. Blake Stepp, Matt Santangelo. I mean,
I didn't even mention Matt. He was the all-time leading assist guy. You know what I mean? And I didn't even mention him. It's ridiculous. That's the hardest part. And to be honest, I feel sorry for whoever, and I know who the people are that got to do the jerseys coming up here, because you're next. But after that is going to be some hurt feelings, and I'm glad I don't have to be a part of that selfishly, because I'm just like, there's too many good players and too many guys with really good numbers that are going to be left off, right? You know what I'm saying? Not rightfully, but you can't have every good player up there, right? So it's kind of like the Mount Rushmore question. You're just like, I want to stay away from that one a little bit.
Yeah,
but
well, you know what? We'll call you Switzerland, right down the middle. You don't have to answer the question
yeah,
again.
exactly. There you go. That's me, a pacifist. That's me for sure.
Well, Adam, I appreciate the time. It's been great to talk a number of things about Gonzaga basketball, your career, some of the experiences and memories that you've had. For the initial episode of the Bulldog Broadcast, I'm Dan Dickau. Today's guest has been Gonzaga legend Adam Morrison.